The violin strings sang through the empty streets of New York City. Katie Morrison stood on the small, wooden stage in Central Park, her bow moving across the strings like it was dancing. The sound carried far in the quiet air. There were no cars honking, no people shouting, no city noise at all. Just her music and the wind through the dead trees dot around her. Maybe 300 people sat on the grass. They were all that was left of 8 million. Some wore torn clothes. Others had bandages on their arms and faces. Children sat close to their parents. Old people leaned on walking sticks. Everyone looked tired, but they all listened. Katie played a song her grandmother taught her when she was 7 years old. It was about hope, about tomorrow being better than today. The melody rose and fell like waves on a beach. Some people in the crowd started to cry. Others smiled for the first time in weeks. She had been playing for 20 minutes when she saw the man in the blue uniform. He stood at the back of the crowd, tall and straight. His hair was gray at the sides. His face was hard, like stone, but when she looked at his eyes, she saw something soft there. Something that hurt. Commander Jake Sullivan had not planned to stop. He was walking back to the military base when he heard the music. His orders were simple: check the communication towers, make sure the emergency broadcasts were working, report back to General Adams. But the violin made him stop walking, made him stand and listen. Jake had been a soldier for 20 years. He fought in 3 wars. He saw friends die. He killed enemies with his own hands. Nothing scared him anymore. But this music scared him, not because it was dangerous, because it made him feel things he had locked away. The gray silence had come to Earth 6 months ago. Nobody knew where it came from. It just appeared in the sky one day, like gray clouds that never moved. Then people started getting sick, not sick like the flu, sick in their minds. They stopped talking, stopped moving, stopped caring about anything. They just sat and stared at nothing until they died. The doctors tried everything. Medicine did not work. Surgery did not work. Nothing worked. The gray silence spread from city to city, country to country. First it took Asia, then Europe, then most of America. Now only small groups of people were left. Groups like this one in Central Park. The alien ships came after the gray silence. Hundreds of them. They formed a circle around Earth and just waited. They did not attack. They did not help. They just watched. The humans who still had working radios tried to talk to them. The aliens never answered. Katie finished her song and started another one. This one was faster. It made people tap their feet. A little girl in the front row started to clap. Her mother smiled and clapped too. Soon half the crowd was clapping along. Jake felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to remember what it was. Joy. He had not felt joy in so long. He almost forgot what it was like. The music was doing something to him. Something he did not understand. Up in the alien ships, Captain Zara of the Minari watched the humans through her view screen. Her people were peaceful. They studied other worlds and tried to understand them. She had seen many species face extinction. They all did the same thing. They fought each other for food and shelter. They tried to run away. They gave up hope and waited to die. But these humans were different. They were gathering together to make music. Music when their world was ending. Music when death was coming for them all. It made no sense to her. Admiral Vex of the Valari Empire watched from his command ship. His people were logical. They solved problems with facts and planning. To him, the humans were wasting time. They should be working on weapons or building ships to escape or finding ways to cure the gray silence. Instead, they sat in a park and listened to sounds. Katie began her third song. This one was slow and sad. It was about saying goodbye. About loving someone even when they were gone. About being grateful for the time you had together. The crowd grew quiet. Many people wiped tears from their eyes. Jake found himself walking forward. He did not plan to move. His feet just carried him closer to the music. Closer to the woman with the violin. He stopped at the edge of the crowd and stood there, listening. The song ended. Katie looked out at all the faces. So many good people. So many stories that would never be told. So many dreams that would never come true. But they were here now. They were alive now. They were together now. She raised her violin again. This time she played something she had never played before, something that came from inside her heart. It had no name, it was just feeling turned into sound. It was fear and hope mixed together. It was love for everyone who was listening. It was anger at the gray silence for taking her world away. It was determination to keep playing until the very end. The music grew louder, stronger, it seemed to push against the gray clouds above them. For a moment, Jake thought he saw them move, just a little. Just enough to let a tiny bit of sunlight through. Other people saw it too. They pointed up at the sky and whispered to each other. The gray silence had never moved before. Never changed, never reacted to anything. But something was different now. In the alien ships, sensors started beeping. Energy readings were changing. The gray silence was responding to something. Captain. Zara leaned forward in her chair. She had never seen anything like this before. Admiral Dex frowned at his displays. The humans were affecting the gray silence somehow. It should not be possible. The gray silence was a weapon. It was designed to be unstoppable, yet something was happening down there. Something that did not fit into any logical pattern. Katie played her heart out. The crowd listened with everything they had. Jake stood perfectly still, feeling the music wash over him like warm rain, and high above them all, the gray silence stirred for the first time in 6 months. Just a little, just enough to give 300 humans something they had almost forgotten. Hope. 3 days passed after Katie's concert in Central Park. The gray silence grew thicker in the sky. More people stopped talking, more people stopped moving. The small groups of survivors got smaller every day. Dr. Lisa Chen worked alone in her laboratory at Columbia University. Most of the building was empty now. The other scientists had either died or given up, but Lisa kept working. She studied samples of the gray silence under her microscope. She ran tests on the gray particles that fell from the sky like snow. Lisa had been studying alien diseases for 10 years. She thought she understood how they worked, but the gray silence was different. It was not really a disease, it was something else. Something that attacked the mind instead of the body. Something that made people lose hope. On Tuesday morning, Lisa made a discovery. She was looking at gray silence particles through her best microscope when she accidentally knocked over her coffee cup. The coffee spilled on her radio. The radio started playing static. Loud, harsh static that hurt her ears, but something amazing happened. The gray silence particles on her microscope slide started to move. They twisted and shook like they were in pain. The static noise was hurting them somehow. Lisa stared at the slide for a long time. Then she turned off the radio. The particles stopped moving. She turned the radio back on. They moved again. She changed the radio to different stations. Music made them move a little. Talk shows made them move less. But static made them move the most. She spent the whole day testing different sounds. High sounds, low sounds, loud sounds, soft sounds. She played recordings of animals, of machines, of people singing. Each sound did something different to the gray silence particles. Then she remembered Katie's concert. She remembered how the gray clouds seemed to move when Katie played her violin. She remembered the tiny bit of sunlight that broke through. Lisa grabbed her phone and found a recording someone had made of Katie's music. She played it through her laboratory speakers. The gray silence particles went crazy. They spun and jumped and tried to get away from the sound. Some of them actually dissolved. Lisa ran the test 10 more times. Every time, Katie's violin music hurt the gray silence, but other music did not work as well. Classical music helped a little. Pop music barely worked at all. There was something special about Katie's playing, something that made the gray silence weak. That evening, Lisa walked to Central Park. She found Katie sitting by the lake, playing her violin for a small group of children. The children looked sick. The gray silence was starting to affect them. But when Katie played, they smiled and laughed like normal kids. Lisa waited until Katie finished her song. Then she walked over and introduced herself. "My name is Dr. Lisa Chen," she said. "I study diseases. I think your music can help us fight the gray silence." Katie looked at her with tired eyes. "Music cannot cure a plague, doctor." "Maybe it can," Lisa said. "I have proof." "Will you come to my laboratory tomorrow?" Katie wanted to say no. She was not a scientist. She was just a musician, but something in Lisa's voice made her curious. Something that sounded like hope. The next morning, Katie followed Lisa to the university. The laboratory was full of machines Katie did not understand. Computers with blinking lights, microscopes bigger than her head, tables covered with test tubes and slides. Lisa showed Katie the gray silence particles under the microscope. They looked like tiny gray worms, wiggling and moving. "Watch what happens when I play your music," Lisa said. She pressed a button on her computer. Katie's violin music filled the room. The tiny gray worms started to shake. They curled up like they were being burned. Some of them disappeared completely. Katie stared at the microscope. "How is this possible? I think the gray silence feeds on silence," Lisa said. "On emptiness, on people giving up hope." But music is the opposite of silence. Especially your music, it is full of feeling, full of life. The gray silence cannot handle that much life. Katie sat down in a chair. Her head was spinning. "You think music can save the world?" "I think your music can," Lisa said. "But we need more than just one violin. We need a whole orchestra. We need music playing everywhere at the same time." That afternoon, Commander Jake Sullivan came to the laboratory. He had heard about Lisa's discovery from General Adams. The general wanted to know if it was real or just wishful thinking. Jake watched Lisa's demonstration. He saw the gray silence particles dissolve when Katie played her violin. He was a practical man. He believed in things he could see and touch. This was impossible, but he was seeing it happen. "How do we make this work on a bigger scale?" he asked. Lisa pulled out a map of the world. Red X marks showed where the gray silence was strongest. Blue dots showed where survivors were still alive. "We need to connect all the communication systems," she said. "Radio towers, television stations, internet cables. Everything that can carry sound. Then we broadcast music from all of them at the same time. That would take weeks to set up," Jake said. "We do not have weeks. The gray silence is spreading faster now. Then we make it work in days," Katie said quietly. Both Jake and Lisa looked at her. "You said my music is special," Katie continued. "If that is true, then I have a responsibility to use it. How many musicians are left alive?" Lisa checked her computer. "Maybe a few hundred worldwide. Most of them are in the survivor settlements. Then we find them," Katie said. "We bring them together. We teach them to play the kind of music that hurts the gray silence." Jake shook his head. "It is too dangerous moving that many people. Setting up all that equipment, the gray silence gets stronger every day." Katie stood up and picked up her violin. "Commander, 3 days ago you stood in Central Park and listened to me play. What did you feel?" Jake remembered. "The joy, the hope, the feeling that maybe everything would be okay. I felt alive," he said. "Then help us make everyone feel alive," Katie said. "Help us teach the whole world to sing." Jake looked at the map on the wall. At all the red X marks where death was winning. At all the blue dots where people were still fighting. It was the craziest plan he had ever heard. It had almost no chance of working, but he remembered the music in the park. He remembered how it made the gray clouds move. "What do you need?" he asked. Lisa smiled for the first time in months. "Everything." The work began at sunrise. Jake's soldiers spread across the city, checking every radio tower and television station. Most were broken or abandoned. The ones that still worked needed new parts and stronger signals. Lisa spent her days testing different types of music on gray silence samples. Katie practiced new songs and taught other musicians. through video calls. In Chicago, Ben Parker sat at his piano in an empty jazz club. The electricity still worked, but no customers came anymore. When Katie's message reached him through the emergency radio network, he laughed out loud for the first time in weeks. Music to save the world, he said to himself. Why not? Nothing else has worked. Ben had been playing piano since he was 5 years old. He grew up in the blues clubs of Chicago, learning from old masters who could make a piano cry or sing. He understood what Katie meant about music with feeling. His fingers knew how to put soul into every note. When Katie called him on the video phone, Ben saw a young woman with tired eyes, but a strong voice. Dr. Chen says jazz music works almost as well as classical. Katie told him, can you teach other musicians in Chicago? I can try, Ben said. But most of the good players are gone. The gray silence took them early. Then we work with who we have left, Katie said. Even someone who just learned to play yesterday is better than silence. In Madrid, Spain, Maria Santos sang alone in her apartment. She had been an opera singer before the gray silence came. Her voice could fill a concert hall and make people weep with beauty. Now she sang to keep herself from going crazy. When the call came from America, Maria was suspicious. Americans with a plan to use music as a weapon, it sounded like madness. But she had seen what happened when she sang near gray silence clouds. They seemed to pull back, just a little. How do we know this will work? She asked Katie through the crackling video connection. We do not know, Katie said honestly, but doing nothing means we all die anyway. At least this way we die fighting. Maria liked that answer. She had always been a fighter. In Detroit, Cole Washington sat behind his drum set in an abandoned warehouse. He was only 19 years old, but he played drums like he had been doing it his whole life. The steady beat of his drums had kept his neighborhood calm during the worst days of the gray silence outbreak. When Cole heard about the plan, he knew exactly what Katie meant. Rhythm was the heartbeat of music. If they were going to make the whole world sing, they needed a strong heartbeat to hold it all together. I am in, he told Katie. Tell me what you need. Meanwhile, Lisa made a disturbing discovery in her laboratory. The gray silence was not just a weapon, it was alive. The particles moved with purpose. They communicated with each other through some kind of signal she could not detect. They were learning. It is getting smarter, she told Katie and Jake. The gray silence is studying us. Learning how we think and feel. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means we do not have much time. Lisa said, the gray silence is adapting. Soon it might find a way to resist our music. This news made Jake work even harder. His teams repaired communication towers around the clock. They connected radio stations that had not talked to each other in months. They built new transmitters and fixed old ones, but the work was dangerous. The gray silence was thickest around the communication towers. Soldiers who worked too long near them started to lose hope. Some sat down and never got up again. Jake lost 3 good people in 2 days. Katie felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Every hour that passed meant more people died. Every mistake could doom the whole plan. She practiced until her fingers bled. She taught other musicians through video calls that barely worked. She wrote new songs that might be humanity's last music, but something else was happening, something wonderful. As word spread about the musical defense plan, people started coming together. Survivors who had been hiding alone joined groups. Children who had stopped talking started to sing again. Even people who could not play instruments found ways to help. In New York, an old man named Frank fixed electrical equipment. He could not carry a tune, but he could make sure the power stayed on. A teenage girl named Amy could not play music, but she could operate radio equipment better than most adults. Everyone found a way to contribute. The musicians worked day and night. Ben taught blues piano to anyone who would listen. Maria gave singing lessons through video calls. Cole showed people how to keep steady rhythm with simple drums made from pots and pans. Katie coordinated everything, moving from group to group, teaching and encouraging. Lisa discovered more about how the gray silence worked. It fed on negative emotions. Fear made it stronger. Despair made it grow faster, but positive. Emotions hurt it. Hope weakened it. Joy made it sick. And music, especially music played with passion and love, was like poison to the gray silence. We are not just fighting a disease, Lisa explained to Jake. We are fighting an emotion vampire. It eats sadness and fear. But if we can fill the air with enough happiness and hope, we can starve it to death. Jake understood now why the plan might work. It was not about the sound waves or the frequency of the music. It was about the feeling behind the music, the human spirit that refused to give up, the determination to keep singing even when the world was ending. Up in the alien ships, the observers were confused. Captain Zara watched humans sharing their last food with musicians. She saw people giving up their own shelter to protect musical instruments. It made no logical sense. Admiral Dex was more concerned. His sensors showed the gray silence changing its behavior. It was responding to something happening on Earth, something that had never happened before on any world. The gray silence had attacked. Should we intervene? Captain Zara asked during a command meeting. No, Admiral Dex said. We observe, we do not interfere. That is the law. But privately, Zara was not sure the law was right this time. On Earth, Katie stood on her stage in Central Park again. This time, hundreds of people gathered to listen. Musicians from all over the city came with their instruments. People who could not play music came to sing along. As Katie raised her violin, she looked up at the gray sky. The gray silence hung there like a ceiling of death. But for the first time since it arrived, Katie was not afraid. She began to play, and the whole crowd joined in. The music rose up toward the alien ships and the gray silence beyond. And in that moment, something shifted, something that would change everything. The countdown began at midnight. In 12 hours, every working radio tower and television station on Earth would broadcast the same signal. Katie's violin would lead a worldwide orchestra of survivors. It was humanity's last chance. Jake stood in the communication center, watching his teams make final preparations. Green lights showed which stations were ready. Red lights showed the ones still having problems. Too many red lights. Not enough time to fix them all. How many do we have? Katie asked, walking into the room with her violin case. 60% of the network. Jake said, maybe 70 if we are lucky. Is that enough? Lisa looked up from her computer screen. She had been running calculations all night. I do not know. The gray silence is stronger now than when I first tested it. We need maximum coverage to have any chance. Katie nodded and walked to the main broadcast booth. Through the thick glass windows, she could see the mixing board with hundreds of switches and dials. This was where her music would start its journey. Around the world. In Chicago, Ben Parker sat at his piano in the radio station. The building was old and cold, but the piano was perfectly tuned. He had spent 3 hours making sure every key sounded right. Around him, 12 other musicians waited with their instruments. A trumpet player named Dave, a saxophone player named Ruth, a bass player named Tony, people who had never played together before, but were ready to try. Remember, Ben told them, this is not about playing perfectly. This is about playing with heart. The gray silence can tell the difference. In Madrid, Maria Santos warmed up her voice in the television studio. She had gathered 15 singers from across the city. Old people who sang in church choirs, young people who sang in rock bands. A little boy named Carlos who could whistle. Like a bird, they all knew the songs Katie had taught them. Breathe from your belly, Maria told the group. Sing like your life depends on it. Because it does. In Detroit, Cole Washington checked his drum kit one more time. The warehouse had been converted into a broadcast station in just 4 days. Cables ran everywhere, microphones hung from the ceiling. 20 musicians sat ready with everything from professional instruments to homemade drums. Keep the beat steady, Cole told them. If we lose the rhythm, we lose everything. I will count you in, and then we play until Katie tells us to stop. Around the world, similar scenes played out in dozens of cities. Musicians who had never met working together. People who had given up hope finding reasons to try again. Children singing songs their grandparents taught them, but something else was happening too. Something that surprised everyone. At exactly 6 a.m., Captain Zara made a decision that changed everything. She broke formation from the alien fleet and flew her ship closer to Earth, close enough to hear the human broadcasts clearly. Captain, you are violating quarantine protocols, Admiral. Vex called over the radio. I am conducting a scientific observation, Zara replied. The humans are attempting something unprecedented. We should document it properly. What Zara did not tell the Admiral was that she had been listening to human music for 3 days. It affected her in ways she could not explain. The Minari were a peaceful people, but they had forgotten how to feel wonder. Human music brought that feeling back. Other ships followed Zara's lead. Not many at first, just a few curious captains who wanted to see what the humans were doing. But as the morning went on, more ships broke formation. They formed a loose circle around Earth, close enough to receive the music broadcasts. Admiral Vex was furious, but he could not court-martial half his fleet. He ordered the remaining ships to maintain position and observe. On Earth, the final hour approached. Katie stood in the broadcast booth, checking her violin one last time. The strings were perfect, the bow was ready. She had practiced the opening, sung 100 times, but her hands still shook. Lisa sat at her monitoring station, watching the gray silence through her instruments. The alien plague was acting strangely. Usually it moved slowly, like thick fog. But today it was swirling and shifting like it knew something was coming. It can sense our preparations, Lisa told Jake. The gray silence knows we are planning something. Jake checked his watch, 30 minutes until broadcast time. Around the world, musicians were taking their positions. Radio operators were starting their equipment. People were gathering in groups to listen and sing along, but the gray silence was fighting back. In several cities, the alien plague suddenly grew thicker. People who had been healthy started to feel hopeless. Some musicians put down their instruments and walked away. 3 radio stations went silent as their operators gave up. We are losing people, Jake said, watching the red lights multiply on his control board. Katie closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother, the old woman who taught her to play violin when she was a child. Her grandmother always said music was not just sound, it was communication. It was one heart speaking to another heart. Then we play for the people we are losing, Katie said. We play for everyone who cannot play anymore. The final minutes ticked away. In the alien ships, crews gathered around their communication systems. They had never heard anything like human music before. Most alien species communicated through logical data exchange. Music was a completely foreign concept, but as they listened to the human practice sessions, something strange happened. The Velari, who prided themselves on pure logic, found their minds wandering to thoughts of beauty. The Kreks, who were natural warriors, felt urges to protect instead of conquer. The Zilari, who were natural traders, wanted to give instead of take. Even Admiral Vex found himself listening. He told himself it was for tactical reasons, to understand how the humans were affecting the gray silence. But privately, he felt something stirring in his chest, something his people had no word for. At exactly noon, Katie raised her violin. Around the world, musicians lifted their instruments. In space, alien crews leaned forward to listen. The first note rang out clear and strong, a single violin playing a simple melody, but within seconds, it was joined by piano from Chicago, then voices from Madrid, then drums from Detroit. The music spread across the planet like sunrise, connecting every working radio station and television tower. For the first time in 6 months, Earth sang as one voice. And in that moment, the gray silence began to retreat. The music spread across Earth like wildfire. Katie's violin led the melody while Ben's piano from Chicago added rhythm. Maria's voice from Madrid soared above the instruments. Cole's drums from Detroit kept everything together, from every working radio tower and television station. The sound carried across continents. In New York, people came out of their hiding places to listen. They stood in the streets, on rooftops, in empty buildings. Some sang along, others just listened with tears in their eyes. For the first time in months, they remembered what it felt like to hope, but the gray silence fought back harder than ever. Dark clouds swirled faster in the sky. In some cities, the alien plague grew so thick that people could barely breathe. Radio stations went dead one by one as operators collapsed from despair. "We are losing the network," Jake said, watching red lights flash on his control board. "London is down. Tokyo is down. We lost half of South America." Lisa stared at her instruments in amazement. But look at the readings where the music is still playing. The gray silence is actually dissolving. "It is working, Jake. The music is killing it." Katie played harder, pouring her heart into every note. She could feel the weight of the world in her music. Every person who had died, every child who had stopped laughing, every dream that had been destroyed, but she also felt something else. The strength of everyone who was still fighting. In the alien ships above Earth, something unprecedented was happening. Captain Zara of the Minari felt moisture in her eyes. Her people did not cry. They had no word for tears, but the human music was doing something to her that she could not explain. "This is impossible," she whispered to her crew. "How can sound create such feelings?" Her science officer, a young Minari named Kess, looked up from his instruments. "Captain, our emotional response centers are showing activity levels we have never seen before. The human music is affecting our brain chemistry." Other alien ships reported similar effects. The Valari, who valued logic above all else, found themselves making decisions based on feelings instead of facts. The Cracked warriors felt urges to protect the humans instead of avoiding them. The Zilari traders wanted to give their resources away for free. Admiral Dex tried to maintain order, but his own crew was changing. His weapons officer, a stern Valari named Grix, suddenly turned to him with wet eyes. "Admiral," Grix said, "we should help them." "Help who?" Dex demanded. "The humans. They are fighting for their survival with nothing but music." "It is the most logical thing I have ever seen." Dex stared at his officer. Grix had never used the word logical to describe anything emotional before on Earth. The music grew stronger. More musicians joined the broadcast from smaller stations. A violin player in Paris, a flute player in Sydney, a guitar player in Mexico City. People who had been silent for months picked up instruments and played along, but the gray silence was adapting too. Lisa watched her monitors in horror as the alien plague changed its behavior. Instead of retreating evenly, it was concentrating its power, pulling back from areas where the music was strongest and attacking places where the signal was weak. "It is learning," Lisa said. "The gray silence is trying to find the source of our broadcast. If it can destroy the main transmitters, it can stop the music." Jake understood immediately. "It is targeting us. The gray silence is coming for the BROADCAST center outside the building." They could see the gray clouds growing thicker, darker, more focused. The alien plague was gathering its strength for one final attack on the heart of humanity's musical defense. "How long do we have?" Katie asked, still playing her violin. "Maybe 10 minutes, Jake said. "Maybe less." Katie made a decision that surprised everyone. She stopped playing and turned to face Jake and Lisa. "We need to take the music to them," she said. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "The gray silence is pulling back to attack us here. That means it is weak everywhere else. If we can get musicians into ships and fly them directly into the gray silence, we can attack it at its source." Lisa shook her head. "That is suicide. No one could survive inside the gray silence for more than a few minutes. Then we make it count," Katie said. "We play the strongest music we can for as long as we can." Jake stared at her. "You want to fly into that thing?" "I want to win," Katie said simply. Before anyone could argue, Captain Zara's voice came over the emergency radio frequency. It was the first time any alien had spoken directly to humans since the quarantine began. Humans of Earth, Zara said, "This is Captain Zara of the Minari vessel Harmony. Your music has shown us something we had forgotten, the power of hope. We wish to help." Jake grabbed the radio microphone. "Captain Zara, this is Commander Sullivan. How can you help us? Our ships can carry your musicians safely through the gray silence. Our shields can protect them long enough to complete their mission. But we need volunteers." Katie was already moving toward the door. "I volunteer." "Katie, no," Lisa said. "If something happens to you, the music stops. Everything falls apart if I do not go. The gray silence wins anyway," Katie replied. "And I will not be alone." She was right. Within minutes, volunteers stepped forward from around the world. Ben Parker in Chicago, Maria Santos in Madrid, Cole Washington in Detroit. Musicians who had spent their lives bringing joy to others were ready to risk everything for one final performance. Admiral Dex watched in disbelief as ships from his own fleet broke away to help the humans. Zara's ship was first, but others followed. The crack sent a battleship with the strongest shields. The Zalari offered their fastest transport. Even some of his own Velari officers requested permission to join the mission. "This is madness," Dex said to his bridge crew. "Yes," Admiral Grix replied. "It is also the most beautiful madness we have ever seen." The alien ships descended through Earth's atmosphere for the first time. They landed in cities around the world, opening their doors to human musicians. Katie walked up the ramp of Zara's ship, carrying her violin case and nothing else. "Are you ready for this?" Zara asked her. Katie looked back at Earth, where millions of people were counting on her. Then she looked up at the gray silence, swirling and angry in the sky above. "No," she said honestly. "But we are doing it anyway." The ships lifted off, carrying their precious cargo of musicians directly toward the heart of humanity's greatest enemy. It was the most dangerous concert in history, and the audience was the entire galaxy. The alien ships flew straight into the heart of the gray silence. Katie sat in Captain Zara's vessel, watching through the window as gray clouds closed around them like a tunnel of death. The ship's shields glowed bright blue, fighting to keep the alien plague away from the hull. "How long can the shields hold?" Katie asked. 10 minutes, Zara replied. "Maybe 15 if we are lucky." Katie nodded and opened her violin case. Around the galaxy, other ships carried other musicians into the gray silence. Ben Parker sat at a portable piano in a Crax battleship. Maria Santos warmed up her voice in a Zalari transport. Cole Washington set up his drums in a Velari cruiser. On Earth, Lisa watched her instruments as the ships disappeared into the alien plague. The readings were incredible. Wherever the musicians went, the gray silence began to break apart. But it was also fighting back with everything it had. "The gray silence is concentrating all its power," Lisa told Jake over the radio. "It is trying to destroy the ships before they can complete their mission." Jake coordinated the attack from the ground. "All ships, you have maybe 10 minutes before the gray silence overwhelms your shields. Make them count." Katie raised her violin and began to play, but this time, she did not play alone. Through the ship's communication system, she could hear Ben's piano from space, Maria's voice singing from another ship, Cole's drums keeping perfect time from a third vessel. The music they made together was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. It was not just sound, it was pure human emotion turned into harmony. Joy and sorrow mixed together, hope and fear dancing with each other. Love stronger than death. The gray silence screamed. It was not a sound that ears could hear. It was a feeling that went straight to the soul. The alien plague was dying and it knew it. For millions of years, it had fed on despair and silence. It had destroyed countless worlds by making people give up hope. But it had never faced anything like human music before. In Zara's ship, Katie played with tears streaming down her face. She thought about her grandmother, who taught her that music was the language of the heart. She thought about all the people Who had died? All the children who would never grow up. All the dreams that had been lost, but she also thought about the future. About children who might live because of what they were doing today. About music that would be played on worlds not yet discovered. About hope that could never be completely destroyed as long as someone was willing to sing. The ship shook violently as the gray silence attacked the shields. Warning lights flashed red, sparks flew from damaged equipment, shields at 20%, Zara called out. "We need to retreat." "Not yet," Katie said, playing even harder. "We are almost there." She could feel it. The gray silence was breaking apart, not just around their ships, but everywhere. The alien plague was a single organism spread across multiple star systems. When one part died, the whole thing weakened. In other ships, the same thing was happening. Ben played blues piano like his life depended on it, because it did. The Crack's warriors around him watched in amazement as their emotional sensors went crazy. They had never felt anything like the feelings this human music created. Maria sang an opera that made the Zalari crew weep with joy. They were trading people who had forgotten the value of anything that could not be bought or sold. Her voice reminded them that some things were priceless. Cole drummed with such passion that the logical Velari officers found themselves moving to the rhythm. They had spent centuries believing that emotion was a weakness. Now they discovered it was actually a source of incredible strength, but the ships were taking damage. The gray silence threw everything it had at them. Shields failed, hull plating buckled, life support systems sparked and smoked. "Katie, we have to go," Zara said urgently. "The ship cannot take much more." Katie looked out the window and saw something beautiful. The gray silence was dissolving. Like salt in water, it was breaking apart and disappearing. In the distance, she could see blue sky for the first time in months. Real sky, clean sky. Sky without death in it. "Look," she whispered. Zara followed her gaze and gasped. The gray silence was retreating from Earth, not just pulling back, but actually dying, dissolving into nothing. The alien plague that had destroyed so many worlds was finally meeting something it could not defeat. "All ships, retreat now." Jake's voice came over the radio. "The mission is complete. Get out of there before the gray silence collapses completely." The alien ships turned and flew back toward clear space. Behind them, the gray silence continued to fall apart. What had been a ceiling of death became scattered gray clouds, then wisps of smoke. Then nothing at all. On Earth, people came out of their hiding places and looked up at clean blue sky. Children who had not laughed in months started to giggle. Adults who had forgotten how to smile remembered what joy felt like. The gray silence was gone. In the alien ships, something else was happening. The crews who had helped rescue the human musicians were changed forever. They had felt emotions their species had never experienced. They had learned that logic and feeling could work together instead of fighting each other. Admiral Vex watched from his command ship as the gray silence died completely. His sensors showed no trace of the alien plague anywhere in the star system. The humans had actually done it. They had defeated death itself with nothing but music. "Admiral," Officer Grick said quietly, "request permission to open diplomatic channels." "With Earth, granted," Vex replied. He was still trying to understand what he had witnessed, but he knew one thing for certain. These humans were unlike any species the galaxy had ever seen. Katie's ship landed back on Earth 3 hours later. She stepped out onto the ground and looked up at the clear blue sky. The sun felt warm on her face. Birds were singing in the trees. The world was alive again. People gathered around the landing site. Thousands of them. They clapped and cheered and cried with happiness. But Katie did not feel like celebrating yet. She walked to the microphone that had been set up and raised her violin one more time. "This is for everyone we lost," she said simply. She played a slow, sad song. A song of remembrance, a song that honored the dead while celebrating the living. As she played, people all over Earth joined in. Some sang, some hummed. Some just listened with full hearts. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had shown Them something new, something that could not be taught or sold or conquered. The power of hope, the strength of music, the courage to face death with a smile, and in the clear blue sky above them, alien ships waited to learn more about the species. That had just changed everything.